Welcome back. I'm Connie Sokol, your host of Call to Create, and we are so thrilled today with our beautiful, lovely guest, Brooke Romney. Thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm so excited to join you.
We adore you, and I have loved that I have been able to podcast you once before. We were just chatting before. It was so funny because I said once I posted it, people, they saw us side by side, they kept saying, I can't tell who's who. So, the most gorgeous, wonderful, beautiful smile one is Brooke, of course, right there.
You're too sweet, but I love being compared. So it was awesome.
We get to say, yes, we are actually, doppelgangers for each other. Yeah.
Perfect.
We'll go with that. All right. I'd love to give you the official bio, and then we're going to jump right in because she has had such a marvelous journey. And for those that want to be speakers and writers, want to be in the media and to share your message effectively, such great stuff for you today with Brooke's journey. So let's get started. Brooke Romney is a writer, speaker, and connector, and is committed to sharing real life with a hopeful twist. She is the best-selling author of 3 books, 52 Modern Manners for Today's Teens, Volume 1 and 2, and I Like Me Anyway, Embracing Imperfection, Connection, and Christ. So good. Her fresh perspective and relatable style has engaged millions of readers in the Washington Post, Deseret News, Studio 5, Time Out for Women, and on her blog and Instagram at Brooke Romney Writes, where she has created a vibrant community of women who learn and lift. Brooke comes from girly roots, but has morphed into an outdoor adventuring, dirt-loving mom of 4 boys, 1 daughter-in-law, and a new grandbaby. And her husband, Mike, keeps her on her toes, she says, but loves her unconditionally, even when she leaves all the lights on and cupboards open. It's nice to see that you have some quirks like the rest of us. All right, let's jump right into this beautiful journey that you have had. Let's start back. Many people maybe don't know that your writing career sort of got those roots while you were on Capitol Hill, and then kind of led to writing for newspapers and magazines. So if you can take us back to that time, what were you thinking? What were you wanting to do to make your mark as a writer?
Well, you know what's so funny is I just needed a job. So we moved out to DC, and my husband had a job, and I was like, I need a job, and I'm in DC. I might as well try and work for the government somehow. So I just applied to a bunch of places, and I got hired as just like a front office person. And then the person that was doing press said, do you want to help me do press? And so I got my first taste at how powerful words can be in a place that uses them very carefully. So that was so fun. And I'd always been like just a hobby writer. I didn't do a lot of writing, but I majored in English and I loved writing essays, which is funny. Most people don't, but I loved it. And I loved just the power of the written word. And so as I did that a little bit on Capitol Hill, then I moved to another company and did a little bit more writing for them, kind of starting to figure out that my talents were definitely not in the organization space. They were definitely more in the writing space and the creative space. So did that for a little bit. And then I had a really fun experience when I moved to Arizona. I had stopped writing. I was staying home with my kids, and a friend had been writing a weekly article for the Arizona Republic about moms. There was a new area in Arizona that was like lots of young families. And she came to me and she said, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to go ahead and give it up. He asked me if I had anyone that would be interested. So I gave him your name. Do you want to try it? And I thought, well, I'm not qualified. I'm not capable. I don't have any experience. But I thought, I'll just go to the interview and see what he says. And so I put on like my best face and tried to be as confident as I could. And I got the job. And that kind of started my motherhood writing journey, which is such a fun thing to look back on because I had no idea what it would start.
And you have that record. I don't know about you, but writing when you're raising your children, you have all this fodder, right? You have all of this content, and it just flows naturally because you're dealing with stuff and you're finding out solutions. And then it's almost like a twofer. You got family history because now you got it all recorded of these life experiences you had with raising your children. So did you find that in that experience, what did you start to see were the struggles that these women had? How did they respond to this? And what were some of the things they were dealing with?
Well, it's interesting because with that first job, I was telling other people's stories. So I wasn't telling my own story. I was telling other people's stories. And for me, that was so inspirational. I got to interview all these moms who were doing things differently. I did a lot of crowdsourcing, how do you do this? This is a problem. This is an issue. And it was so fun because I had really young kids. I think my oldest was only like 3. And so it kind of prepared me for each stage. And as I got to a stage and had no clue what I was doing, I was like, this would be a great idea for an article. Like, what could I ask? How could I say this? And there were a few things that I felt like I was good at that I could bring to the table with suggestions, but mostly it was an opportunity to learn from other people, which I love doing.
Oh, and you see that thread through everything that you do. You're like a gatherer of information, and then how does it apply? And then sharing it with people in a way that they can receive it and then apply it in their own lives. So that is just beautiful how that all started.
Yeah, it was
So
really a fun beginning.
did you have any moments that you saw where this was going and you said, oh, this is what I want to do and this is where it's going, but or did it kind of just sort of unfold as you went?
You know what? It really unfolded. I felt really grateful to just be able to have this, part-time at-home job doing something I loved. So I think I was just grateful and excited about what I got to do. It did morph into, there were a few local magazines back then that I got to write articles for. I remember they wanted me to do like restaurant reviews, and that was so fun because we didn't have a lot of money and it was so fun to eat for free at good places. So kind of started dabbling in a few more things like that, a little more on the lifestyle side, but this was way before anything was going on, like on blogging or anything like, anything like that. So then we moved to Michigan, and I was really sad to give up this writing job. But by then the internet had exploded. Google, Instagram wasn't quite out yet, but Facebook was. And I thought, I'm going to write here on a little blog. And I titled it Mom Explores Michigan because I was so jealous of all my friends that lived in Utah because they had people telling them like where to go with your kids, how to have fun with your kids. They had all these ideas and there was nothing like that where I was. And so I was like, well, there's nothing here. I'm going to try to create it. And it was really awesome. It was fun and it was easy to write about things that I liked. It was more like reviews. I would put in like a book review or a recipe here. And it just allowed me to test the waters of doing something online for myself.
So fun. And all the while you're unfolding and developing this gift, these talents in these natural and normal ways, like Elder Uchtdorf talked about in the missionary
Yeah.
work. But you're doing it in this way. And in that sense, really doing missionary work in sharing about parenting and motherhood and all of those things. So was that the impetus? What was the impetus for you to write I Like Me Anyway? Did you start to see struggles that women were having and wanted to address that? Or where did that stem from?
Well, I had been collecting experiences through motherhood for all this time. And one of the things I have always been good at is connecting with other women. And I gained so much strength from understanding that I wasn't alone in my struggles, in my kids' struggles, in my faith struggles, whatever it was. And I realized that if women could just feel normal, like whatever they were going through wasn't this crazy thing that they had to keep secret or that was so weird about them or so strange about their kids. The more you talk to other women, the more you realize our experiences are so similar, different details, but the feelings are similar. And so I was just kind of along the way, just kind of collecting these experiences. And then when we moved from Michigan to Utah, I was not able to do the lifestyle thing anymore because there were women in Utah that were just doing it in an amazingly great way. And I wasn't good at taking pictures or doing graphics or anything like that. And so I thought, I guess my writing days are over. So I took a little break for a few months and then just had this pull to continue writing. And I thought, well, what am I even going to write about? People were sharing recipes that were amazing, all these things. And I just thought, I can't do any of that. And so I sat for a bit. And then one day I felt compelled to write an article about a parenting struggle that we were having and kind of how I'd worked through that in my mind and some tools that I had gained from doing that and a new perspective. And I wrote that article and it sat in my draft form. It was still on Mom Explores Michigan. It sat in the draft form for about a month, just trying to be brave enough because it's hard to put yourself out there and the things that you deeply feel. And so it sat out there for about a month and I finally hit publish. And that was my top performing post. I'd had the blog for 3 years. It was my top performing post and it went pretty viral. This was back when Facebook could make things go viral a lot easier, but it went viral. And it was entitled, Why We're Taking the Fun Out of Life. And Deseret News picked it up, a few other news organizations, some mommy blogs. And after doing that, I thought, well, maybe I have something to say, maybe I have something that's worth saying and worth reading. And after that, I continued to write monthly for Deseret News, pulling on experiences I'd had in the past. And that was a really fun exercise. And as I started writing, I realized that I had a lot more I wanted to say and share, especially that was faith-based. And then as I gathered those, I had an idea for a book that sat there for a few years and then finally was pushed to write it. So
I love how you share this journey and you see this pattern of I'm doing something and then maybe that window closes and it makes me consider, sit for a minute, ponder, look at what direction I need to go now. And something that's been simmering that you've had on the back stove or something that you let simmer and then it comes to fruition, comes to the front and boom, it takes you to that next level. I just love it.
Yeah.
So did you, after you wrote that book, did you feel like this sort of segue kind of naturally happened into speaking, or were you looking to share your message more in an increased way, or how did that evolve?
Well, I actually started speaking before the book came out, which is
Ah,
very rare. And I feel incredibly blessed that it happened that way. As I was writing articles online, I started getting asked by different groups to come speak and share a little bit more about the articles and about the way I'm thinking or about certain topics. And I was taking advantage of all of those speaking opportunities. Then I was asked to speak at a BYU Women's Conference, felt very not ready for that, but I did it. And it was an amazing experience. And someone was there who was involved with Time Out for Women. And they were looking for another speaker and they thought that I might be a good fit. And so it was back in 2019, I believe, or maybe September of 2018. And I was able to start speaking before I had a product, which was awesome. And I learned a lot. I think with both writing and speaking, the way you get better is doing. There's really not another way to get better. You can do a lot of studying. I watched a lot of people speak and pulled things that I admired or appreciated. And same with writing. But other than that, the only way to get better is just jumping in and doing it. So it was an exciting experience. And I had spoken a lot before I went on Time Out for Women, but that was definitely a whole new level. So
is there an experience that comes to mind that was extra meaningful to you in that Time Out for Women experience, either with the women in the audience or with the co-presenters that you were with? Is there anything that sticks out to you that was just signature for you?
Well, I have a couple. So the first one was I am someone who feels confident when they are prepared. And so as Time Out for Women came, I was so overly prepared that I really wasn't struggling with being confident. I thought, you know what? I have done this talk 1 million times. I am ready. But the way the Time Out for Women speaking circuit went is I was the last speaker on Saturday. And so I watched as my spiritual heroes spoke, and they were incredible. They were captivating. They knew exactly how to work an audience. They were so comfortable with their material. And suddenly I felt very out of place, like I didn't belong, like I wasn't going to be good enough, that I was going to disappoint all these women that were there. It was a large audience in Layton, Utah. And right before I went on, I was feeling like physically, there was no way that I was going to be able to do what I needed to do out there. And Jenny Reeder, who I had just met, leaned over and just said, just be yourself. That's why they asked you to be here. And she didn't even know what was going on in my mind. She had no idea that I was, feeling so out of my league and not capable. And she said that. And right then, just kind of that light bulb went off that I wasn't there to be the other speakers. I was just there to be myself and to be prepared and be ready and to deliver the message that Heavenly Father had given me. And I went up there and it was a great experience. It wasn't perfect. There were things I messed up, but it was a great experience. And I think after that, there was such a confidence in that when we're called to something and we're willing, and then we put the work in, that Heavenly Father makes up the difference for us. And I think sometimes we can forget that there's steps to go along with that, like we do need to be called, we do need to feel willing, and then we have to do the work. I think sometimes people are like, oh, it didn't go well, but the preparation did equal the outcome. He can only magnify us as much as we're willing to magnify ourselves.
I love that. That makes me think of President Nelson, where he said, I plead with you to do the spiritual work. And it is
Yeah.
work. The Lord
Yeah.
loves effort, and he does reward that effort. And he also knows where we're at. And for our listeners that are listening, there's oftentimes moms or dads they've got their day job, or the moms are doing the kids, and they feel called to do certain things, and they feel like they can't give it their full. And I know what you're saying in preparation. It's not that you have to have every jot and tittle prepared, but that the things that you needed to do to prepare for that. You have done your very best. You've done the best that you can do. And then you say, 16 stones, here they are. Can you touch them and make them even better? So I love that. I love that you learned that being you, it went great, and it wasn't perfect, and it didn't need to be in order for it to have impact or influence on that audience. Absolutely love that. What was the other experience that was meaningful?
Well, at the end of that season, I was speaking in Arizona, and I had some fun friends in the audience, and Brad Wilcox was speaking with me. And I talked about how I wasn't really a hugger. And Brad climbed up on the stage, wrapped his arms around me, and spun me in the air twice, right in the middle of my talk. And I loved it for a few reasons, because Brad is just full of love. And there was so much laughter and joy and excitement that came just from that little moment. But also realizing how far I had come in being able to, like, from the first time I spoke to, I needed every word to be exactly right. I was so nervous. And if anything would have thrown me, I just don't know if I could have recovered. But then it was my second to last time at Time Out for Women that year. And to just be able to enjoy and be part of the moment. I think sometimes when people start things, we want to be at the end, right? We want to have already gone through all of the hard stuff. We want to have already done our first round or published our first podcast. We want to be the expert at the beginning. And that's just not how it goes. But as we do it, we become better. And I think a lot of women, men, I think we're paralyzed because we're not good enough yet. And I just love the idea of, from that very beginning to the end, thinking, wow, I was so comfortable on that stage that didn't ruffle me. I just got to enjoy it.
Oh, that is so beautiful. And he just did that to Bonnie Cordon at Women's Conference in the keynote session. She talked about the importance of touch, and particularly hugging. And afterwards, he brings her husband up on stage, and they both talked about 8-second hugs. And they both just sat there, and the audience counted down 8 seconds while they hugged. It was so funny.
So
That
fun.
is so Brad.
So
and
fun.
I love this idea of this projection. We were just talking about this in our group this morning, where we keep thinking that we've got to jump to that place, right? And be that already. I remember when I had my first child, and people would say to me in kind of a derogatory way, oh, you're such a first-time mom, because I'd be washing up the binky and stuff like that. And I finally just got to, yes, I am. Because I wanted to own my first child experience. Yes, I am. I am going to wash that binky 3 times. And yes, maybe on my 4th child, I'll lick it and put it back in his mouth. I don't care. I am a first-time mom. So speaking of that, let's shift the gears and segue here. How did you go from focusing on just the women and the moms? What compelled you to start talking more specifically and more niche to the parenting and the teens especially? Was there something that kind of drove that?
I think just having a teen myself, and what I realized about the teen years, and I am sure other people have had this same realization, is there's tons of information about raising babies, toddlers, and even young kids. And not only that, but even like in your groups of friends, there's tons of talk about like nap times and kindergarten and all this stuff. And then your kids get a little older and they hit like 11 or 12, and there's very few online resources. Your friends have all like tight-lipped. Nobody's talking about what's going on in their family. And it's another time where you feel really alone. And you're like, is this normal? Is my kid normal? Am I normal? Is the situation normal? Is there any help out there? Is there anything we could do better? And I realized there wasn't anything. And when I would post about teen things, just every once in a while, I would have this flood of parents who wanted to know more and wanted to dig in. And thank you for talking about this. And there wasn't a space. There wasn't somebody that was really doing that in a way that I resonated with. there were a lot of people that were kind of like disparaging or being funny about it, which I think there's a place for that too. Sometimes you just need a little humor in difficult
Yes.
situations too. But I was hungry for community, and I was hungry for someone to say, we did this. And I noticed like a few times when I was really struggling with someone and I would ask an older mom about the situation, and she was somebody that I loved and would keep confidence, it felt like a huge weight was lifted from me. And so I just started talking a little bit more about teens and about teens' experiences and asking people for advice, saying, what did you do? And I think having multiple teens has allowed me to keep certain things more confidential, and then using the experiences that my readers send to me. So it's not always about me and my family, but I feel really compelled to help people find solutions.
Oh, and I love that. Again, this pattern of you see a need and you can see that you can fill it and do your best to do that. And I love too that you weren't nervous. I mean, you probably were, but you weren't feeling like, oh, I've got to be a total expert before I even talk about teens, because it can be scary when you're talking about parenting or when you're advising or saying opinions on something. You know how slammed people can get in social media nowadays. But I love that you didn't stop doing what you were doing until you felt like you had so much life experience and so many things to share under your belt. You did it in the doing. And I think this is, again, this pattern that we see and that we can recommend to everyone. You're just going to get it in the doing. And as you've been teaching these sweet parents like us, you focus a lot on, I mean, you focus on a variety of things. Your books talk about everything from smelling good to restaurant manners to owning your mistakes, all kinds of things. But I notice a big emphasis on tech and devices and the impact of those. Is there anything that you've seen as far as for our listeners that really struck you as far as a really negative impact of this, and then how we can navigate that and move through that successfully?
There's so many negative impacts, and you can read about them in every headline right now in the news. It's such a hot topic. But just being a little bit more specific for me, one of the things that has worked really well for us, for one, is delaying exposure to a smartphone. I think parents sometimes feel like it's a need. And now it's so amazing because we have a lot of options in our world where you can still be connected without having the internet or social media. So kudos to the companies who filled that gap. And I'm super happy that we can still be connected to our 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds without introducing them to smartphones. The second thing that I have realized that's really helped me lately is realizing that my kids need to understand that we are on their team. My husband is so good at being a great example of keeping technology as a tool and not something that like overpowers him. He's a great example of that. And then we're really working to help our kids understand that our goal is for them to live their best life. And that will include some technology, and it will also include a lot of in-person interaction. And that they know that we're not there to be the bad guys, to make everything difficult, to make their life hard. We want to put up some parameters and some controls so that they aren't always fighting on their own. Technology is a huge animal with a lot of power, and we want them to know that we are behind them and helping them keep it within the bounds that are good for their life, that are good for their relationships, that are good for them to be able to finish homework, to be able to develop an in-person personality, all those things. And I know it's different for every child. I hesitate sometimes talking about technology because I know that different things work for different families, and that you will have a kid that you have done all the things right, and they are going to get burner phones and sneak their phones and get around screen time. And it doesn't mean you're a bad parent or that they're a bad child, but that draw is so, so strong. And so there's a lot of different solutions for families with that.
And I love that assurance. I think so many parents do feel that they've done all they can do. And what else do I do? Because they'll just go to their neighbors. They'll go, oh, we're going to go hang out and go play basketball. And then they'll just going to go do whatever. And I love so much of what you share is very trust-based. It's very, like you said, we want you to live your best life. And then providing those opportunities that do create connection, that show the joy and the fun and other things so that there's more of a balance. And I think that's a great approach, a great way to navigate this. Now you have 4 boys. So I just have to ask you, Here you had this whole girly sort of background. What is one thing that your boys, your teen boys particularly, have taught you that's been extra meaningful to you?
So my having teen boys gives you a thick skin because they don't really dance around what they have to say. And at first, I thought this was a little problematic, but I'm really grateful because it's created a lot of open conversations. So when I'm telling them something and they say, the way you're doing that is actually so annoying. If you keep asking if I'm going to go to the gym, I'm just not. Like, I'm just not. That's super annoying. And that would have been very hard for me to handle, 10 years ago. But now I'm really grateful because I want to be better. I want to do better. I want to communicate better. So when they tell me that like passive aggressive is annoying and makes them want to do the opposite of what I'm trying to say, it helps me self-reflect and say, okay, if you don't like that, let's have a conversation, right? And then we can open up conversations. I feel like I've been shockingly more open having boys because they're not willing to do the dance of making me happy or, just trying to like not have the contention or not rock the boat. They're plenty willing to rock the boat, which means that we have more open and better communication. It's not always perfect. And there are times when I'm like, I've even told one of my kids that he needs to just soften delivery, which I think is important in your whole life. You can still be honest. You can still communicate what's important, but you need to soften the delivery.
This is so huge. And again, I just see so many of these threads through what you do. You're all about authentic connection. And I think this for teens is just paramount that they, girl, boy, they feel and need that authentic connection and they just reject whatever doesn't feel authentic. And when we are open and embrace that. And again, I love the point that you make, which is we don't have to accept everything that they say, but I love that you let it to, well, let's talk about that. Well, tell me more about that. How does that feel for you? My daughter did this the other day. She looked at me and she said, Mom, I don't know if you realize, but this is the third conversation we've had that you're teaching me a life lesson. And I had to sit back and I went, she said, I just want to come up and connect. And I went, oh, and I said, hang on, I know what's happening. You're graduating. And on my mind is all the things that I'm like, did I teach her? Did she get this? And this is what's buzzing and running this program in my mind. And I said, I can see exactly what you're saying. Okay, we can do, how about we agree one life lesson a day? Are we good with that? And now it's a joke. Now it's like, I text her when she's like,
life lesson?
That counts. Life lesson. Okay, we're done. We're done for the day. You met your quota, I love this. And I think, like you said, it makes us so much better parents and friends and coworkers when we get to those deeper layers and those more authentic ways of connecting. So, so good. All right. I know we only have a little bit of time left. Let's go to, you've shared some of these highs and lows and things like that. And in these journeys, we talked really briefly before we started this, that sometimes people can look at people who are speakers and writers and in media, and they just sort of like popped up like a daisy, like it just worked, right?
Yeah.
Is there a moment that we talk about the peaks and the valleys? Was there a valley moment that you just said, I don't know if this is working. I don't know if what I'm doing matters or is making a difference. Was there a moment like that for you? And how did you get out of that?
Well, especially because creators are listening, I want them to know that I have valleys all the time. Like it's a regular occurrence from the time I started writing, 10 years ago to now. There are times often where I'm like, what am I even doing? Is this worth it? Whatever. But a special valley that just really jumps out is when I wrote my first book, I thought I had a publisher. They were excited about me writing something. And after holding on to the book for a few months, they decided to go a different direction. And I had not even thought about plan B because I just thought they had asked me to write a book, done deal. They would help me get it to the point it needed to be. And so that was a huge shock for me. And I had to decide right then, the book was probably like 3/4, all the words were there, but there was still a lot of editing to go. And then the whole idea of, printing and like, that was just very overwhelming for me, especially as someone who loves to create. I was not interested in figuring out the details. That's why I really wanted a publisher. And so there were a few other options to test out other publishers or the option to self-publish. And I sat in that valley for quite a while, just so discouraged about like, well, is it even good enough? If they didn't want it, would it even be good enough for anyone to read it? And do I have enough money and resources and time to even figure out a self-publishing option and all that? And I eventually ended up self-publishing, and it was a huge blessing overall, not just for me, but for the way the book could be accessed. I can see the wisdom in the plan now, but in the moment, that was really difficult. And so I would just suggest, as you're in the valleys, sometimes asking, what do I need to learn here? Like, how can I increase my skills? How can I make my message better? What contacts could I reach out to help me solve this problem? But then also saying, what do I need to learn from this? Is there a lesson? Is there something I'm supposed to be learning? And then I think that what really makes a difference between those who end up fulfilling at least part of their dream are the people that keep going. Sometimes it's just about longevity. When somebody says to me, I started this Instagram, or I started this business, or I wrote this book, and it's not going well. And I say, oh, how long has it been going? And they're like, oh, it's been 6 months. And I'm like, I've been writing now for over 10 years. I don't think I made a penny till 4 or 5 years ago. I didn't gain traction on my Instagram. I was consistently writing thoughtful content. I didn't gain traction for, 4 full years of consistency. And so I think a lot of times, especially in a fast-paced world where you think people are getting famous, living their dream very quickly, like you said, it's easy to overlook the past and all the steps and the heartache and the failures that have gone into getting to a place where they feel like they're doing things that feel important and useful and that people are paying attention to.
And I love this idea that in that valley, it just reminds me so much of the Savior and his atonement, because he can take anything and he can just morph it into something good. He can always make it into a positive. And that valley ended up turning out to be a great peak. And I'm guessing that's the same book that was number 29 out of 38 million books and was bestseller. And on Amazon, I mean, who would have foreseen that, right? There's more than one road. And I love that the Lord always provides this third way that we haven't even considered, didn't even know maybe even existed, and has this whole path laid out with people and solutions and situations and so much goodness that there's just more than one way to can a peach, so to speak. So I love this idea that you're helping people to be able to see the genuine, again, the authentic journey and the reality of it isn't an overnight success. The joke of it's a 20-year overnight success, right? Because
Absolutely.
that's exactly how it is.
And just thinking about it too, there wasn't an easy solution for the place I was in. It's not like, oh, then a different publisher called me. It was like, okay, like now get to work. The rubber meets the road. What are you willing to do? How much do you believe in this? What are you willing to sacrifice? It was all my money on the line. It was all my time. It was all my ego on the line. And I think sometimes when we're looking for like that plan B and the Lord always provides a way, you just want the way, when really he provides a way, but it's going to take a lot of effort from you.
Oh, that's so good. I think about that going back to the 16 stones. He did the work of mining those and getting them and presenting them to the Lord. And then what did the Lord say? Go to work, right?
Yeah.
There's more work here involved. I think about Nephi. He's like, okay, I'm going to build a ship. And then he comes down the mountain and sees the first tree and is like,
yeah. Oh, why don't you build the ship, right? Like that would be easier.
Long and winding road here. Oh my goodness, we talked about so many wonderful things. Is there any one last bit of advice or an ism or pearl of great price that you would love to leave these wonderful people who are on their journey to be called to create? Is there anything that comes to mind to help them keep going?
The more light that you can put into the world, it's always worth it. And sometimes I think we get really caught up in numbers and analytics, and those things are all important if you're actually building a business. But there's a lot of behind the scenes growth and work that sometimes has to be done first. And so continue putting out light, continue making connections, continue being genuine and authentic in the way that you're approaching your business and what matters to you. And don't be afraid to pivot, to ask for help or guidance or feedback. I think it can do a lot for the process going a little more smoothly and a little faster if you're willing to be open to that.
And being open to those next step things of, like you said, I didn't know how to self-publish, so you had to learn that. And it's in that learning and the doing that we gain the talents and the spiritual gifts and all the things that we need to keep progressing toward him. It just is such a gorgeous plan. Oh, I wonder who came up with that.
Yeah, right.
Wonderful. Thankful to Heavenly Father that it's all so good and all purposeful. Brooke, this has been thorough joy. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And if you have loved this interview, we would love for you to check out some of the other interviews we have. They're amazing, wonderful people who are giving you tips and tools on your journey, being able to make it smoother and better. Jane Clayson Johnson, Steve Young, John Heater, AKA Napoleon Dynamite. All of these people who are sharing their experiences and their expertise in helping you fulfill your journey in being called to create.